So I'm Andy Rasheed, I live in the Adelaide Hills. I'm a freelance photographer by trade, but concurrently to all of that work I've been developing some fairly unusual musical instruments, putting less emphasis on tradition and what's come before and much more of an emphasis on possibilities. So driving better options, I guess, by starting from scratch and assessing something as if it hadn't existed. I'm trying to make an instrument that people want to pick up. So you walk past it and you've got this desire to pick it up because it's a tactile experience, it's a beautiful playing experience, and it's a beautiful audible experience. So it's not about trying to make something that's fantastical or unusual. That's easy, but trying to make something that's ergonomic, inviting, and engaging, that's the hard bit. That's where it becomes tricky. So yeah, I'm not trying to be different for different sake. I'm trying to be different for the sake of trying to find the logical resolutions to some of these questions that I have. So the evolution of instruments is completely hinged in the limitation of the material that was available when these instruments were conceived, and then the people who are the practitioners who have taken those instruments into the 20th century, 21st century, have been constantly referencing the necessities that came from using specific materials. But what I'm trying to look at is if we could actually start again, if someone came and said, we need to produce this instrument that fits in your hands, either lap or that you can play fretted, that creates beautiful tone, is loud, is fun to play, is even, is ergonomic, what would that instrument look like today? And it probably wouldn't look completely like a guitar looks now, because it doesn't need to. So if you imagine the most efficient shape as a circle, then why are we using things that aren't circles? You know, we're using these where everything is hinged back into what has come before. And even when people make carbon fibre guitars, they're still making them in the shape of a guitar. They're still referencing what's come before, even though they could potentially step off. So that may be a marketing strategy, in that nobody's going to buy something that doesn't look like a guitar. That might be the case. But it might be that the instrument that could come from a new blueprint doesn't need to look like a guitar. That might offer a different voice. I'm okay with that. It's not about mimicry. It might offer a different tonality. It might offer a much greater dynamic range through larger volume. It might offer ergonomic possibilities that we're not even aware of yet. So it's not that I hate tradition. It's just I don't resonate with it. Pardon the pun. You put an instrument in someone's hands, they play it for the first time, and their perceptions are shifted. So I've had it with a handful of different instruments that I've made, where I've offered someone greater flexibility and possibility, and more than they were expecting, or more than they are used to expecting. And so if you can facilitate a broader experience through an instrument, then you're in you're in fertile territory. It offers immediately you're stepping into unknown, uncharted water. So theoretically, you're probably more likely to experiment yourself even. It'll take you out of your comfort zone, out of your expectation, and put you in a different place. So hopefully someone picks up one of these instruments and immediately they're trying different techniques. So a friend of mine, Fabian, who's a master hand percussionist, played a multi-face bongo that I made the other day, and he was able to play the heel of his palm and his fingers on two separate drums. That's actually not possible to use those techniques. They're normally a single-faced drum technique, because the proximity of the drums, because of the way they're made, allowed me to have multiple faces hip to hip. They're partitioned, and one side of it's this drum, one side of it's that drum. Whereas in the past you'd have a conga, and that's a specific instrument that's got a body that means that the body can't be literally right next door to a smaller drum. So there's immediately these possibilities for him to trial different technique. There's a broadening of what he considered possible, and immediately he started playing differently. So he was using a left-handed technique on his right hand, and he looked down and went, what's going on here? And then when he finished playing for the first time, he looked up and he went, man, there's just so much scope here. There's so much going on. Well, everyone's been surprised at the volume, the punch that the bass has, and the openness and the evenness. So I've been working for a really long time to try and fulfil a checklist. And the guitar, the last finished guitar that I made, which was prior to a dismantleable prototype that's sitting behind me, had massive volume. It was incredible volume. The trebles and the mids were vast, but it didn't have a bass response. So it's a valid instrument, and it has this incredible unique voice, but it didn't fulfill my requirements, which were that I'm not trying to make something that you'd put into the hands of a traditional builder and they'd be disappointed with an aspect of the instrument. It needs to broadly fulfill all the requirements of a regular acoustic guitar, but then I'm looking at this idea, well, how can I make something that potentially weighs less or is a more tactile experience to hold, and how do you deal with the instrument? And I was also looking at it from an acoustic playing point of view. So I've made a port that faces your audience. So there's still tons of resonance coming back at the player, but there's a passive amplifier that projects out towards your audience. So that was one of the real key things was I was looking at. We've created a really big sonic environment within the instrument, and then we're taking that sound and we're giving it another treatment. So it's not just that we've made the box and we're putting the sound from the strings into the box, but that sound then gets amplified again. So, and it may be that in 15 iterations there's greater development around all of those ideas, and I might be able to get the areas that are resonant, make them out of a different material and make them even thinner so that they've got more potential of movement, or they can work more like a spring. I took this latest pre-production prototype to show my friend Steve Salvey, who's a professional builder. He's played thousands and thousands of instruments. He worked in one of the biggest guitar shops in London. And I put it in his hands and I said, assess this instrument, and I need to know your actual assessment of the instrument. I'm not interested in you blowing smoke up my bum. And he played it for about a half an hour, went through the entire range of the fretboard, moved around it, strummed it, got me to play it. And I said, what don't you like? And he said, there's nothing here that I don't like. He said, you go home and draw it up. You're ready to go. Stop procrastinating. So that from him was wonderful affirmation that I'd hit all of the markers that I thought I was hitting when I listened to it. So, and the other aspect of that is that a couple of people have heard it and visually, kind of gasped because of the output of the instrument. So it's got a lovely voice. It's got quite a big voice. It's got smoothness, but it's got this evenness through, and I suspect the evenness comes from the design of the bracing, which works to basically offer a home for all frequencies within the circular soundboard. That's my suspicion anyway. I'm not a physicist and an acoustic technician or even a real guitar maker. I make these things. So. When I was about 16, I went into my friend's back room and he was building his first classical guitar, and he went on to be a bouzouki and oud maker. And something physical happened. I walked into that space and immediately it was just like, I got to get some of this. This is fantastic. And then I'd never managed to find my way into anything remotely traditional, except for perhaps my first cajon. That was a traditional build, but even that veered left really quickly. So there was a need for me to make that was really apparent, all those years ago. And I've found my way in, and then I've found by some means I've managed to navigate my way through acoustic environments in a way that I can't see anyone else doing, which doesn't mean I'm the only person doing it. It just means that I'm either isolated or I'm doing something a bit wacky. So I've thrown a vast amount of my energy, like thousands of hours, at trying to produce instruments that are basically fulfilling a need within me. And it's not thumbing my nose at what's come before, but it's just saying there might be a different way of looking at this. So how do we approach it? And the other thing is I'm really keen to share the ideas because I know that the instruments that I'm making offer something unusual, and the response that I've had from the players who have played them has been overwhelming and really positive. And even non-players, it's been a really uplifting experience to share these instruments and get other people having a go. There's this sort of sense that if something isn't completely traditional, that anyone's prepared to experiment and have a go. And the cajon is a beautiful and unusual instrument in that it's a rare instrument that you actually sit on top of. Most instruments you're sitting behind. So piano, wind instruments, harmonica, you've got it in front of you, everything's in front of you, whereas the cajon is a box and you sit on it. And I've made a 30 centimetre by 30 centimetre cube, and kids would come and immediately gravitate towards it and want to play it because it was their size. So I do love sharing ideas. All right, well, a standard cajon is a box with a 3mm front face. They're 40 centimetres tall, or between sort of 40 and 45 centimetres tall generally. They're about 30 centimetres wide. You sit on the top and you play the front face, which is traditionally screwed on with about 5 screws across the top. Down the sides there's a gap, then there's 3 screws, and then there's screws along the bottom. There's all sorts of variations on with modern cajons. And then inside a traditional instrument, it would have a guitar string that runs and touches on the front face of that instrument. So you've got a snare, in effect, that runs from the bass to the top and back again. And that's what you've got. You've got a single face. There's huge tonal variation on that face, and they're quite bassy. They've got about a 12 centimetre circumference hole in the back. And that's the instrument. And so I made a few of them, and then at one point I thought, what if I could put a petition in it? So I made a dual-faced cajon and petitioned one of the faces to make a bongo-style drum. They were okay. Then I came up with this idea that I could make a multi-faced cajon that basically the faces, the petitions got bigger and bigger and bigger. And the first one of them that I made was an absolute ergonomic nightmare, but it was complete proof of concept. And some of those faces are magnificent. Like they have beautiful timbre about them. They're really lovely faces to play. And before I'd even finished that, I decided that I needed to build an ergonomic version of that. And so the ergonomic version of that ended up being a wedge-shaped cajon. So the front is 30 centimetres wide. It's about 42 centimetres tall. And the front's about 30 centimetres wide, but the back is about 40 centimetres wide. So the front is a standard cajon face, but with an adjustable snare, because I prefer the sound of an adjustable snare is preferable to my ear, because I could get more of a sizzle on it, but I could also remove it. So when you take the snare off that front face, the tonality of the drum really comes out. There's this beautiful richness, and it just broadens the tonality of it. So I've got that as my front face, and that's a really successful instrument just in that regard. But then on the left-hand side, I've got a 30 by 30 centimetre, 30 by 30? Almost, maybe a little bit smaller than that. Another face, which is like a conga, and that's a gorgeous sounding face. It's this tight, beautiful, higher pitched drum than the front face, but still it's got depth and it's got lots of warmth. And then on the right-hand side, I've got I'm trying to think what they were called. They're bongos, but I've got the small face first, and then the bigger face. It's a macho and something else. I can't remember what the names are. But they're really powerful soloing devices. So you've got this traditional instrument in the front, and then on the side you've got like the party poppers. You can jump on with your left and your right hand and play melody, because you've got the conga on the left-hand side and then the bongo, and there's a relation between the intervals. So they're quite beautiful sounding things. They work really well together and give you this option of not having to move. You pull your knees together and you can solo on the sides. And then I've put ports on the bass on either side, either the left and the right-hand side, so you can flip the instrument without changing your microphones. You can turn that instrument 180 degrees, and then across the back, the wide face of that instrument, I've got 3 bongos across the top and then 2 deeper bongos down the bottom. And so there's this correlation between all of those tones, so bop, 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 bop. And then the conga is a tone, almost a whole tone deeper on the side, which is now on your right-hand side. So there's this melodic potential that just hasn't existed in a cajon. There are many benefits. So basically you could walk to the gig with your bongo, your conga, your cajon, and basically a nest of drums in one bag. You walk on stage, you put the one thing down, a single mic, then mics up all of those instruments in one go, because all of those instruments have the same acoustic potential of volume. So you don't have to have separate mics for anything. So yeah, sound check's a breeze. If you were getting on a plane, you could potentially play gigs with a single instrument if you're a hand percussionist, and just have another bag of your light percussion stuff. So it kind of changes the whole scope of what's possible to carry in with one bag, because fundamentally the difference is that there's a structure inside instead of a structure externally. And that makes the fundamental shift of thinking around the cajon. So having an internal structure has allowed me to be able to bring enough structure to all of my petitions so that I can make all of those drums sing. So there is none of these faces are compromised. In previous iterations that I've seen, there's not enough structure around any of the small drums to make them work, because the key to trying to get energy out of any small area, you need to have enough resistance to that energy on your sidelines. So when you put energy in, if you've got a weak structure around that area, the energy just gets dissipated really quickly and you get very little volume out of it. So if you can create massive structure around small faces, you've got this potential to get really loud volume and beautiful tone out of all of those faces. So that's the key. The fundamental shift in thinking was an internal structure instead of an external structure.